Historic woman sentenced for facilitating female genital mutilation. In a landmark case, Amina Noor, a 40-year-old woman from Harrow, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for facilitating female genital mutilation, or FGM, on a 3-year-old British girl during a trip to Kenya, marking a historic conviction under the UK's stringent anti FGM laws. This case is notable as the first instance in London Metropolitan Police history of charging someone for assisting in carrying out FGM on British citizens abroad, and only the second conviction for FGM in the UK. The judge labeled the act as abhorrent and horrific, highlighting the severity of the crime. Noor, who had undergone FGM herself as a child, feared ostracization from her community, but was ultimately held accountable for her actions. Detective Superintendent Andy Furphy emphasized the Metropolitan Police's dedication to preventing FGM, encouraging victims to come forward and signaling a hope that the sentence will deter future crimes while raising awareness about the issue. Quote, our mission is to prevent FGM from taking place, working with local communities and expert health partners to achieve and safeguard vulnerable children. This is amazing. This is a giant step. And let me provide some more background for people that don't know. A lot of people don't know what FGM is. So let me explain that first. FGM is a form of child abuse, it is a form of sexual abuse. It is recognized as a human rights abuse by the United Nations. It is recognized as a federal crime in the United States. It's recognized as a crime in the United Kingdom and across many other countries. And there are many different types of FGM. Some involve full removal of the clitoris. Some involve full removal of the clitoris, the labia minora, and the labia majora. And then some involve removal of all of that, plus they sew everything closed so that it's basically just flat, completely bare, with a little hole, tiny hole in the bottom for pee and menstrual blood to dribble out. And then when a woman gets married, they literally have to cut her open with a knife um, so that you can consummate the marriage. Um, and then that's called total infibulation. And then there's a fourth type of FGM that is where you basically prick or pierce, usually the clitoris. In 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 and this is all done for non-medical purposes. There is no medical purpose to do FGM. And these are most commonly done on children between the ages of 0 to 15. Girls between the ages of 0 to 15, and it is often done completely without anesthesia. Literally just having your genitals cut off completely conscious as a child. And this happens across the world in many different countries. This happens across religions. And there are some ethnicities and communities and countries where almost everyone experiences this, where the rates of FGM are above 90% of women. And it can cause death. You can die during this. It can cause septicemia. It can cause cysts. It can cause incontinence. It is so severe. Lifelong psychological trauma, extreme pain, just peeing, just doing normal things, extreme pain during sex, because the point is to basically eliminate all sexual pleasure. Also, it's regarded as like a way to ensure virginity. And in many different countries and cultures, there are other myths about it. So sometimes there are myths that, like, if you don't cut off a woman's clitoris, then she's going to grow the clitoris as long as a tail by the time she's an adult. So that, like, you need to do FGM because otherwise she's going to be unmarriable. There are many cultures where if you do not cut a woman, the word that you use to describe an uncircumcised woman is literally like dirty. And the other girls in the community don't even want to play with other girls that are not cut because she's so dirty and impure. So like it's very pervasive, and it is a symptom of like the most extreme kinds of gender inequality. So that's just kind of background about this practice because a lot of people don't know even what FGM is. And so what happens is that there are many places around the world where people move to a different country where it's criminalized, and then they want to perform this on their daughters, but they're in a country where it's criminalized. So what they do is they go bring the daughter overseas and have it performed overseas. And this is referred to as vacation cutting. And there are, yeah, Armin?
That's insane.
Yeah,
Vacation cutting, like that term. Okay, yeah, no,
yeah.
continue.
And I know about this because of my work. And one of the things we do is in the United States, try to make sure that vacation cutting is covered under criminal law on a state by state level. Um, and also work to make sure that culture cannot be used as a defense in prosecution, that religion cannot be used as a defense, or tradition cannot be used as a defense in prosecution, all this stuff. So this woman, Amina Noor, what happened was she was born in Somalia and then she came to the UK and was naturalized as a UK citizen. When she was 22 years old, she was 22 years old and she took this girl, a 3-year-old child, to Kenya. So she took a 3-year-old to Kenya to go get female genital mutilation done to her. And then what happened was Amina says that she didn't know that they were going to cut off the girl's clitoris. They cut off the clitoris of a 3-year-old girl without any anesthesia in basically what was described as like someone's living room. She said that she thought it was just going to be an injection or they were just going to pierce her or something. And she didn't know, she alleges, that they were going to do full type 1 FGM, but they did. And she handed this girl, this 3-year-old girl, off to people that were not medical professionals. She didn't want to be in the room when it happened because she was afraid. Like, if you think this is gonna be totally fine, then, like, why are you so afraid? And then, like, knew that the girl was in pain, but was like, "Oh, yeah, like, she was totally fine a few days later, blah, blah, blah. I thought it was just an injection. I was lied to. I didn't know it was gonna be all this, blah, blah, blah." And then I've seen some conflicting reports that say that in deposition, she might have actually contradicted herself because she said that she was afraid that if she did not do this to this child to facilitate it, that she would be ostracized and cursed by her community. And there are other um, reports that say that actually she knew that that wasn't true. That wasn't going to be a social consequence to her. But I think it's important for people to know that that belief about, like, for many people in their culture, FGM is a prerequisite for marriage. And so they believe that they're doing a good thing for this child ultimately because this is going to make this child marriageable. Otherwise, they're completely unmarriageable. And it's just so dark. So then what ended up happening was this girl was brought back to the UK and she grows up. And then when she was 16 years old, the victim, she tells her English teacher what happened to her. And then that started off the prosecution. And now about 6 years later, there's been the prosecution and the sentencing. And so she's been sentenced to 6 years in prison for this. And this is a really big deal because a lot of these cases are very difficult to prosecute. And this is the second actual full-blown FGM conviction in the UK. Like, in the United States, we know that FGM happens in the United States. Um, but I don't think we have there's been cases that have been brought forward. There have been prosecutions in the United States, but I don't think, to my knowledge, there has never been a conviction. And, there's, like, very difficult features in the law that make that very, very, very difficult to actually secure a conviction. So actually securing a conviction on this, especially considering that this was done abroad, um, is a huge victory for the UK. And I definitely echo the sentiments of the authorities in saying that I really hope this encourages more people to come forward. Because what needs to happen is that there needs to be a cultural shift that demonstrates to the entire country and practicing communities that this is unacceptable and that there will be consequences for it. At the same time as there is other work being done to make sure that victims have access to services and other work to educate communities about how damaging this practice is, and to make sure that different kinds of frontline professionals are educated on FGM so that they can look for signs and risks that it might be happening. Um, so yeah, I wanted to share this story because I thought this was a really big deal and a big step forward. Um, did you have anything else you wanted to share about this story, or otherwise we can.
So were the parents you said the parents were complicit, you said that they didn't know, but they still sent them to is there any legal action being taken against the parents or no?
Okay, let me
Because
be
the parents
clear. I
also
have literally, so in the reporting that I read, there was like no mention of the parents that I have found so far. For all I know,
Mhm.
this woman could be the mother of this girl. I don't know. I do not know the relationship of this woman to the victim. Like, that was not clear based on the reporting at all. I don't know how they're related. I don't know if they're related. So I actually don't know to how the parents were involved. Um, that's not clear to me at all. I don't have an answer to that.
Mm. Okay, so by the way, this is Islamic hadith. For people who don't know, this is what an Islamic scripture is recommended um, to do. Mind it, it's not any Sahih hadith that recommends this, but there are some serious Islamic hadiths that tell you that it's mandatory for men to get circumcised, but it's recommended for a woman to get circumcised. So Islam is the problem. And also, a lot of people try to say that this is a non-Islamic thing. This is an African problem, African culture problem. It is also an African culture problem. However, it's also an Islamic problem because Islam, a lot of barbaric beliefs in Islam, are not invented by Islam. They just existed in the environment at the time, and Islam just makes them more sticky, makes them much more difficult to get rid of. So when we blame, for example, Islam for slavery, obviously slavery was not a uniquely an Islamic problem. It existed in the environment at the time, but Islam just makes it a mandate from God, and that's why it makes it much more difficult to get rid of it. So just like this, like the circumcision is also an Islamic problem, not because Islam came up with it, but because Islam endorses it. That's one thing. I just also want to mention that um, male genital mutilation, otherwise known as circumcision, is also child abuse and should be criminalized. And people who participate in genitally mutilating little boys as well should, at some point, like one day, get arrested and their license get removed and all of that. Every single, like, it's absolutely child abuse and torture and should be illegal. So everything you're hearing, all the seriousness that people are taking about the, taking female genital mutilation these days, that should also be the way that we treat male genital mutilation. So I just wanted to add that.
Yeah, I
And I think
agree.
that it, yeah, okay. Um,
The
unless you're an
immediate
adult
consequences
and you
are
want to do
not,
it too.
yeah, the immediate consequences are not, like, always as severe. There can be very severe
Mm,
consequences,
yeah.
but, just
Over,
basically
but
on principle.
not just on principle. When it comes to an individual case-to-case comparison, female genital mutilation is a bigger problem on one individual compared to another individual. Okay, but as a whole, male genital mutilation is a bigger crime in the world because it's been done to a lot more boys than girls. So I agree that when it comes to comparing one little girl to one little boy, the crime against that girl is bigger than the crime against that boy, but the overall crime against boys is much, much larger.
Do you know who makes the most amazing, gorgeous, and other adjectives that I can't use here on YouTube, blasphemous art ever? We do! And for some reason, we are giving it away for free. Download them now using the link in the description before we change our mind.